Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Gender, Your Guide, a gender-friendly primer on what to know, what to say, and what to do in the new gender culture, by Airton Phd. Narrated by Airton Phd. Preface. Why this book matters. Last fall, I was traveling through a major American airport on a business trip, and I had to go to the bathroom. No big deal, right? Airports have lots of bathrooms. Well, visiting a gendered bathroom actually is a big deal for me. Many airports don't have gender-neutral bathrooms, so I'm forced to choose one side or the other. Waiting for the plane, where every bathroom is blessedly gender-neutral, well, it isn't always possible. I took a breath and began my approach to the women's. Why the women's? Well, having seen bathrooms of all kinds in my time, the women's is reliably clean and there is no urinal cake. These are the only reasons. Entering the area outside any bathroom that splits into men's and women's facilities is like going on stage. I could give someone detailed directions on how to handle it. I'm aware of my clothing. When I travel, I like to dress up a little, and on that day I was wearing a blazer, a crisp button-down, and dark jeans. I'm aware of the speed of my walk, of when to stop meandering and begin a more purposeful stride. Sometimes I head toward a water fountain between the entrances, a gender timeout. If anyone were watching me, they'd likely be appeased by this neutral destination and move along in search of other distractions. Once at the water fountain, I can slip inside the bathroom door. When I enter the women's bathroom, I puff out my chest as much as I can and begin clearing my throat in an artificially high register. Sometimes I hum loud and high like Fräulein Maria traversing the Alps. I smile maniacally and make inviting eye contact with anyone I meet at the threshold or inside to show that I come in peace, and I'm confident that this is the correct washroom for me, despite appearances. It isn't, but when you have to go, you have to go. I choose the first stall I see, grateful for the ubiquity of seat covers in America. I heart Chicago O'Hare, even though the first stall isn't usually one's first choice. I enter, I lock the door, I sit down, I breathe. If the bathroom is busy, I might linger a little while in private, feeling the muscles around my eyes, mouth, and shoulders relax. I make a mistake every time, though. Having put friendly Fräulein Maria back on for the hand-washing experience, I relax and let it all go as I exit, and this is where it always happens. Last fall, as I was exiting the women's bathroom in the airport, a woman was fast approaching the two entrances while speaking on the phone. Seeing me exiting one of the bathrooms, she automatically adjusted course. She strode right into the men's bathroom before realizing where she was, and screamed. This kind of thing has been happening to me for a very long time. Bathrooms are unavoidable places in everyday life where gender is intensified and where people's bodies are scrutinized to determine who belongs and who doesn't. Among transgender or trans people, those like me, whose gender identity or gender expression doesn't align easily or at all within the M or F we were assigned at birth, bathroom stories are a genre that verges on cliché. You do all you can to pass, to be read like the symbol on the bathroom sign. You get clocked, recognized as transgender, and you get out of there as fast as possible. My bathroom story walked you through the energy-intensive process that I go through to do something that most people do without thinking at all. For many trans people, using the bathroom requires thought, planning, and constant vigilance. Other ordinary things take more energy as well, like shopping for clothes that both fit my body and help others to see who I am. I've acquired the necessary skills to get by in these situations from years of learning and practice, and because older or more experienced transgender people have taken the time to teach and support me. The thinking, planning, teaching, and learning can add up to a marathon every time I head outside, even when all I need is a bag of chips or a bag of milk, a thing in Canada. That's one reason why this book is necessary. I started with a bathroom story so that I could clear up a common misconception about why transgender people need you, the person who chose this book. That the thing transgender people experience when others get our gender wrong is offense, or that we're offended. I often hear people say that they're scared of offending transgender people, or that causing offense is the bad thing they want to avoid. This can be a source of tremendous anxiety, and it can make someone go out of their way to avoid a trans person just for fear of offending them. But trans people have far worse experiences than being offended, like being assaulted. And in between being offended and being assaulted, there's a whole range of reasons why transgender people need others to get into the work of changing how gender works for and alongside us. Many of these reasons have to do with the everyday exhaustion of being who we are, not being offended. Trans people can avoid the bathroom sometimes, but we can't avoid other people and the language we use to communicate with each other. For many trans people, everyday communication and interaction are situations where our well-being and mental health are actively, gradually either beefed up or run down, often by people around us who may have no idea how their words or actions affect our capacity to participate in the world. I'm not talking about those people who are set on doing us harm or denying our existence, but people who just haven't had to think about how gender rigidly structures our lives, spaces, and interactions. And so, when someone accidentally misgenders me, applies an incorrect gender pronoun, term, or title, I'm not offended. There's no surge of righteous indignation. It's less of a filling up with feelings and more of an emptying out of energy. After a day of continuous misgendering, I feel like the balloon you find under the couch a week after the festivities, deflated. I'm sometimes too tired to correct or educate even the kindest and most understanding person in the world. Too tired to be kind or understanding in turn, and too tired to be the best person I can be. In the years since I came out as transgender, I've also noticed something wonderful. The incredible effect of people getting things right. When people use or infer my correct pronoun, or use terms for me that match my gender identity, they make an incredible, palpable difference to my well-being. These seemingly small and ordinary things fill up my gas tank. Lee on a full tank is a kinder, gentler person who isn't always on guard against the gendered expectations buried in so much of our everyday lives and language. And when I don't have to spend my extra energy on correcting, explaining, and self-advocating, I'm also more likely to choose fresh air, the gym, or a friend date over Netflix and couch. Moreover, I'm a better listener, teacher, coworker, partner, sibling, kid, auntie, a gender-neutral alternative to aunt or uncle, friend, or even stranger. All this is to say that every ounce of transgender knowledge, skill, and energy will not make everyday life more welcoming for transgender people if we're the only ones making an effort. It takes too great a toll on transgender people to do all of the correcting, explaining, and advocating required to make gender less exhausting all around. This is where you come in, and that's why I wrote this book. In fact, I imagine you chose my book specifically because you want to get involved in the work of creating a more gender-friendly world around you. I'm very glad you did, because we need you. Perhaps you already know a gaggle of trans people, or perhaps you've never, knowingly, met one of us. You might have chosen this book because you want to better understand and support your trans or gender nonconforming sibling, parent, or child. Or you might want to be ready for the next time you meet someone whose pronoun you aren't sure about. Or you might be well aware of how rigid gender rules and expectations have made your own life more difficult than it needs to be. For any and all of these reasons, this book is for you. I study gender diversity in education and can share what's known about transgender people's experiences through research. But I'm also a transgender person myself, a non-binary one at that, which I'll come back to in Chapter 3, who has been involved in trans communities for many years. In 2011, I changed my name and changed my pronoun to singular they. I have a master's and a PhD in education and realized that the world was missing an educational resource, whether for me, for other gender-neutral pronoun users, or for the people in our lives who have to talk about us all the time, because life. And so I founded They Is My Pronoun in 2012, the first Q&A blog on gender-neutral pronoun usage and user support, still going strong 6 years later with well over 30,000 unique visitors in 2017 alone. The experience of running my blog and traveling around to speak about gender-neutral pronouns and diversity under the T has brought me into conversation with many people who are working hard to have their gender needs met and to meet the needs of others. For the past 10 years or so, I've also taught in teacher education programs and engaged hundreds of pre-service teachers in learning about their professional responsibility toward all of their students and all of the ways they do gender, whether they're under the transgender umbrella or not. I've also learned a great deal about the wealth of gendered experience and expertise that we all bring into our interactions with others but don't think about as a resource. What I've learned from all of this teaching, learning, and just living life as a non-binary transgender person is as follows. I am more interested in people being able to live gender in diverse ways with happiness than enforceable conformity in the service of a rigid two-category system. I'm more interested in recognizing the gender possibilities that are already here than in denying that these possibilities have been here since before history began to be written, and regardless, because not all history is written. I'm equally interested in the gender happiness of transgender people and non-transgender people. For these reasons, I'm committed to helping gender do its work with fewer expectations and less harm. This is the approach that I bring to this book. Introduction. Gender is changing. It seems like more and more people aren't doing gender in the usual way. Many young people are expressing gender in ways that don't line up with traditional expectations. In 2017, UCLA researchers analyzed responses to the California Health Interview Survey from kids ages 12 to 17 and found that 27% of about 796,000 youth are gender nonconforming. More people than ever before, children, youth, and adults, are coming out and openly living their lives as transgender men or women. And many transgender people are coming out as neither men nor women in the traditional sense. In a 2011 landmark survey of transgender people in Ontario, Canada, 20% identified as both male and female, neither or some fluid position between the two. A growing number of transgender people are using gender-neutral titles like mix and personal pronouns like singular they, which the American Dialect Society selected as the word of the year in 2015. Definitive style manuals like the Associated Press Style Book and the Chicago Manual of Style, as well as major newspapers like the Washington Post, have added singular they to their guidelines, signaling mainstream recognition of this pronoun and why it's needed. And while varying widely in wording and scope, according to an article by Kyle Kirkup in the University of Toronto Law Journal, there are legal protections for gender diversity in every Canadian province and territory, in 33 American states, and in the District of Columbia. Gender is changing, and this change is gaining momentum. While some people feel like these changes to gender threaten traditional ways of living, others recognize that this diversity has always been with us and is only now coming out or even back into public life. No matter where you stand right now, it's clear that navigating this changing world of gender means a shift in our language and our everyday practices, because gender is everywhere, in how we speak, write, move around in public spaces, and relate to one another. Gender Your Guide is a manual for making this shift yourself, so that you can welcome all of the ways that people do gender, instead of calling others into question without even knowing it. I will teach you how to implement gender-friendly language and practices in your family and friendships, at work, and with people you meet every day. Beyond logistics, I'll also help you understand why it'll benefit you to participate in welcoming the changing world of gender. For example, a persistent theme across the book is that gender friendliness is a good thing for everyone, not only people who are transgender. This is a manual for creating a more gender-friendly world around you. I hope that by studying this book and trying on my suggestions, you'll feel confident, if only more than you feel now, in working to make your world safer, nicer, and less exhausting for people who live gender in ways that weren't expected of us when we were born. This world can be your own home or the nexus of your extended family. It can also be your workplace, church, mosque, choir, or frisbee golf team, also a thing in Canada. The world you set your sights on changing can be your gym, the supermarket, or the bus. It can be anywhere you demonstrate a respect for everyone's self-determination in how they present and articulate their gender, and a willingness to do your best and make better mistakes in the process, because you will make them, and that's okay. It is anywhere you show others, whether transgender or not, that they are real, they are respected, and they are not out of place. I've also included a special coda addressed to the trans person whose person is listening to this book. I imagine interested non-transgender people will choose Gender Your Guide, but transgender people might also give it to others as a resource. The coda shares some self-advocacy strategies for transgender people based on what I've learned from many years of supporting and speaking with others about trying to get our gender-related needs met. But I also make an ask that transgender people, to the best of our ability, understand that meeting our needs does take effort and is a process of learning and unlearning for the people around us. Being gender-friendly is a process for all of us, and we're all at different places in this journey. Gender, Your Guide invites everyone to get on board to make gender more flexible and less constricting, a source of more joy and less harm for everyone. Let's get started. Part 1. What to know. In this part, I will describe how gender works as an ongoing process that we all participate in. Each of us is a gender expert, which means that we know how to follow the rules of our gender category as best as we can. These rules change depending on where we are, and our gender expertise is honed as we move among all the different places where we spend time, making changes in our gender expression, how we act, style, talk, groom, and present ourselves as we go. You know how to do this deep down in your gut, even if you don't know that you know, and even if you haven't thought of yourself as a gender expert. We most often use our gender expertise to avoid standing out and getting called into question by others, which can be harmful. But we can put our expertise to use instead to create spaces where standing out doesn't mean getting called into question and doesn't have harmful consequences. In such spaces, the rules are less like a set menu and more like a buffet. Take what you like and leave the rest for others to enjoy. You'll also learn about some people under the transgender umbrella. Like everyone else, transgender people were assigned a sex and corresponding gender category at birth, but this assignment doesn't reflect who we are. Transgender and cisgender people all work the same gender system, standing out and blending in, getting called into question, and calling others into question too. But standing out can have worse consequences for transgender people. I debunk a common misconception that all trans people are on what I call a binary pathway, or moving from one side of the M2F binary to the other. And I will introduce 3 sometimes overlapping groups of people under the T: transgender people who are women or men, non-binary transgender people who are neither, and people who are gender fluid. You'll learn that there's no one way to be in any of these groups, and that trans people face different challenges and have different relationships to being visible or out as transgender. I'll end Chapter 3 by explaining the concept of transition in a way that makes it clear that transition, like transgender, is a spectrum. Chapter 1. Understanding Gender in Today's World. In this chapter, I explain how gender works and how we all participate in its work. I begin with a broad brush look at the 2 major schools of thought about gender and its relationship to biological sex: gender as a fact and gender as a process. A key distinction between these schools, both inside and outside of academic disciplines, is whether gender differences are attributed to biology or to how we are socialized by other people around us beginning at birth. Next, I explain how gender works from the perspective of gender as an ongoing, lifelong process. We participate in this process every day of our lives, including visually and verbally, by calling others into question when they stand out. I explain many ways in which the question calling happens, whether or not we know we're doing it. Thinking of gender as a process can help you begin to see the role that gender plays and has played in your own life from childhood. We also all have our own gender expertise, no matter our gender identity or gender expression. Naming yours is an important tool for creating a gender-friendly world around you. It can be difficult to start making your own context more gender-friendly if you don't have a sense of your starting place. And so, the end of this chapter gives you some tools to explore how gender currently plays out in spaces where you spend time. I call this process drawing your gender-friendly roadmap. I lead you through a reflection exercise where you'll use your own gender expertise to identify what someone might face in your family, community, friend group, or workplace if they bump up against others' gendered expectations. This will help you think and act proactively, as well as help you notice how gender might be restrictive there already. Fact or process: 2 broad schools of thought about gender. We don't usually think of gender as something that works, a process like house cleaning, but as something that just is, a fact, like whether the house is clean or dirty. Facts seem like dependable things that stand still, whereas processes seem like things that are on their way to standing still, to being facts. But many facts are actually processes in disguise. I'll share an example of fact versus process that has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with a questionable life choice: living with 2 ginormous cats, even though I have a cat allergy. Before I finish cleaning the house, my cats have already begun redistributing their fur and dander. My house is never clean or dirty, fact, because the cleaning is never complete, process. What's worse, the cat's redistribution of fur and dander is actually helped by running all over the house to escape the vacuum. The process is never complete. In the same way, we can think about gender as a process a person participates in that is never complete, and not something that a person just is. Some people argue that gender is a fact about a person that we can know from birth, and that it's basically the same thing as sex. People in this camp primarily attribute gender differences to innate biological sex differences, as opposed to the differences reinforced or even produced through society's expectations. Others argue that gender is a teaching and learning process that's never complete. But they don't believe that biology is irrelevant. In this camp, gender differences are primarily attributed to socialization, including how we are socialized in relation to what our bodies do or do not do. Cat analogies can only take us so far. To better understand the two major schools of thought about gender is a fact, or gender is a process, let's think about the moment a baby is born. Let's assume that the baby's parents have not been given information about the baby's body from an ultrasound in advance of the big day. In a great tide of fluid and relief, the baby emerges. Someone, doctor, nurse, or midwife, catches the baby and notes the shape and size of its external genitalia. What happens next is largely based on the visual appearance of the genitalia, particularly the length of the organ containing erectile tissue, clitoris or penis, and how much of its length is visible. Of course, there's a whole range of externally invisible factors involved in sex development, including hormones, internal sex organs, and gametes, eggs or sperm. But the doctor, nurse, or midwife notes only what they can see and then makes a pronouncement. It's a girl, you have a daughter. Or, it's a boy, you have a son. This pronouncement can be thought of as an ending, gender is fact, or as a beginning, gender is process. We can think of it's a girl as ending uncertainty about what the baby is. She is a girl. She will be a woman. From this perspective, it's a girl just shares factual information about the baby's gender. But we can think of the pronouncement as a beginning of the tremendous effort required to teach the baby how to become a girl who will someday become a woman, and what that looks like in this time and place. From this perspective, it's a girl doesn't just share information, but actually does something. It signs up the baby as a fledgling member of a particular gender category with locally specified rules for how babies of that category must be dressed, addressed, and engaged with. The question of whether or not gender and biological sex are the same thing also separates the fact and process ways of thinking. If we think of gender as a fact, then reading an F sex marker on someone's birth certificate is the same as knowing they're a girl or a woman, and reading an M is the same as knowing they're a boy or a man. But if we think of gender as a process, then someone's F is simply shorthand for quick survey of their external genitalia at birth. That isn't the same thing as a person's identity. Even though most female-assigned babies come to identify as girls, and most male-assigned babies come to identify as boys, identifying isn't just what happens naturally. It's a process. Sociologists of gender describe the process of teaching babies how to be the gender associated with their assigned sex as a process of socialization. The teaching process happens whether or not people know they're participating. For example, psychologist David Reby and colleagues found that adults attribute femininity, if told the infant is female, or masculinity, if told the infant is male, to a baby by listening to their cry, even though vocal pitch differences do not emerge until puberty. In addition, psychologists Melissa W. Clearfield and Neri M. Nelson studied infant-mother play sessions with gender-neutral toys and found that the mothers spoke to, spoke about, and played differently with male and female infants as young as 6 months old, an age when their infants lacked any gender differences. From findings like these, we can take away an unsettling implication. We are often unaware of what we're teaching other people about gender, or how we're participating in gender socialization. Some would say that, because adults aren't always aware that we treat boys and girls, or babies presumed to be on their way to boyhood or girlhood, differently. Differences between boys or girls must be natural, closer to gender as fact. Others believe that actually, adults learned how to treat boys versus how to treat girls, which is closer to gender as process. This brings us to another big difference between the fact and process ways of thinking about gender. What about gender is natural, often used to mean innate or biological, versus what about gender is social. This is often called the nature or nurture debate. In many years of studying and talking about gender with all kinds of people, I've come to see the debate as more of a continuum. Few people live out at the poles, and most pitch a tent somewhere in between, whether they're transgender or not. Where one sits on the continuum depends on many things, like whether one studied a particular discipline. For example, sociology and neuroscience have different knowledge bases about gender. How one's own experiences with gender have played out, and how gender is understood in one's culture or faith. Sidebar. What does intersex mean? Sometimes external genitalia alone don't provide a clear-cut answer to the boy or girl question at birth. In these instances, a baby might be intersex. According to the Intersex Society of North America, or ISNA, the word intersex describes a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of female or male. In a review of research published in the American Journal of Human Biology, Melanie Blackless and their colleagues estimated that approximately 1.7% of the general population is intersex. Alice Drager, a bioethicist and former president of ISNA, points out the sheer variety of conditions loosely brought together under this term. The medical names for various intersex conditions may refer specifically to the genotype, genetic basis, or to the phenotype, body type, or to the etiology, the causal pathway of the condition, or some combination of these. So saying someone is intersex does not tell you anything specific about a person's genes, anatomy, physiology, developmental history, or psychology. Not all intersex people are identified as intersex when they are born. Some might develop indications at puberty. Furthermore, some people identify as intersex while others describe themselves as having an intersex condition or a disorder of sex development. Phrasing varies depending on a person's own relationship to the term intersex. The phrase ambiguous genitalia is commonly used when referring to intersex people or conditions, but it's a misnomer and considered offensive, as is the older term hermaphrodite. Ambiguous genitalia is a misnomer because not all biological variations under the intersex umbrella involve genitalia, as previously stated. Distressingly, there's a history in North American medicine of irreversible genital surgeries on intersex infants, which, according to research by Human Rights Watch, is still ongoing. Operations aimed at normalizing these differences include clitoral reduction surgeries, procedures that cut and remove sensitive erectile tissue in order to reduce the size of the clitoris for cosmetic reasons. Such surgery carries the risk of pain, nerve damage, and scarring, and yields no medical benefit. Sidebar. The big gender reveal. Be honest. When you find out that someone you know has had a baby, what's the first question you ask? Chances are, you, like many people, ask whether the baby is a girl or a boy. From a gender as process perspective, we don't yet know the brand new baby's gender, but perhaps only their sex. In a Huffington Post piece, writer and new mom Jen Wilsey breaks this down even further, asking, "Is it really anyone's business what sex my child has been assigned? Since gender is not knowable at this stage of a child's life, 11 weeks, people are really asking whether my child has a penis or a vagina. That is completely inappropriate and weird." Whether you agree with Wilsey or not, consider the popular phenomenon of the gender reveal cake, a pink or blue dyed cake covered with icing, usually served at a party where slicing reveals whether the baby in question is a boy or a girl, based on a prenatal ultrasound in which external genitalia is visible, or not. I have an active imagination, and have always pictured tense and furtive phone calls between obstetricians and bakery staff. "Do you have the intel? I have to get this into the oven." The next time you hear about a new baby, pay attention to whether the baby's gender, quote-unquote, is volunteered, even if you don't ask. I'll share more about asking gender-friendly baby questions in Chapter 7. Biology and socialization affect each other. By now you've probably inferred that I'm closer to the gender as process or nurture end of the spectrum. But this isn't because I think biology and bodies are irrelevant. Many transgender people's experiences have shown that how people relate to their bodies is itself an ongoing process, not just the way things are. As a result, it's uncommon to find a transgender person on either extreme end of the nature-nurture belief continuum.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?